Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Anthony LaPanta along with this week's special guest. My co-host is Kevin Gorg, my longtime co-worker, cohort, compadre. It's been a lot of years since Kevin and I have been crossing paths, mostly in the hockey world. Michael Russo on assignment tonight for Game 7, Oilers and Panthers. We thank the fans for coming out tonight. I know it's never easy to leave your patio, your deck, wherever you might be on a summer night in Minnesota, but we appreciate the fans coming out. Good crowd here tonight. We'll get to their questions a bit later in the show, but thanks for, I don't know what you were doing today, but thanks for whatever it was for
First
coming
round
in
of
here.
the year. I know you play 6 times a week, but I got out, played Bluff Creek earlier today over, 20 miles away from here. I didn't hit it particularly well, but I made a couple of putts, and great day for it, right? I mean, beautiful day for golf. I like it when it's warm out there. At age 57, I can loosen up a little easier, and had a good time.
Yeah, I got a couple rounds in today. I played this morning in the United Heroes League Camel Classic charity event down in Lakeville, so far today I've driven from Shoreview to Lakeville to Stillwater to Hopkins.
Lewis and Clark covered less ground for crying out loud.
Been good. So we played down there, had a great group. I was with a group from the Twins, actually. We had a lot of fun. I had to bail a little early, had a couple other things going on, and then had to get to Stillwater for a match out there with a good ex-Johnny friend of mine against my younger brother. Played a match at Loggers Trail and then raced across town to get here.
I don't know how you got here, though. You mentioned to me when you first walked in that you got off the golf course and had kind of lost track of time, and it was 6:15. I've been to Stillwater. I know how far it is to this part of the Twin Cities, so I don't know how you did it, if it was a police escort like we had at Hockey Day a couple years ago, but that was pretty impressive.
It was. There was a slight moment of panic, just a little bit, when I was walking off the green and looked at my watch, and let's just say there was a lot of panic from the phone call I got from home because she apparently was well aware of when I was leaving the course. And, you're never going to make it on time. And,
I love it.
Yeah, but we made it. It was good. And so now we've got Game 7 tonight. We haven't really had a chance to chat much during these playoffs. What's stuck out most to you? I mean, this series, unbelievable to see a 3-0 turn into 3-3 and into Game 7.
I'll be the first to admit it, guys. I thought Florida would win this series in 5 games. I picked them coming in, and I've been super impressed with the way Edmonton has found their traction and really flipped the script of this entire series. Their penalty kill has been unbelievable throughout the playoffs. I didn't see that coming. Their goaltending has held up, which also surprises me. I know you and I talked on the front end at the end of the Wild regular season on some teams in the playoffs we liked and we didn't like. I was with you. I thought this Edmonton team was vulnerable on the back end. They have proved me wrong. They've proved everybody wrong. And I get it. Home teams are 12-5 in Games 7 of the Stanley Cup. I don't know how you bet against the Oilers tonight with the momentum they've created.
It's amazing when you really think about it. And I still go back to, and we'll get into Edmonton in a minute, that on the other side of this, I still think they lose the series against Vancouver if Thatcher Demko's playing and if Brock Besser doesn't get hurt late in that series. And the fact that they were able to take advantage of that and win. The last 2 rounds, they have really, I didn't think they had any chance to beat Dallas. And when Dallas was up 2-1, I thought this is exactly how I thought the series was going to go. And in this series, and I've been wrong, and it's been pointed out to me a few times about my impressions of the Edmonton club and the fact that I didn't think you could win with the way their roster was structured. But the way that Connor McDavid has taken over games in these playoffs it's absurd. The dominance that he's shown, and it makes you wonder that is it possible to play like that all season long? If there's a guy that could will a team to come back from 3-0, it's him.
Absolutely. It's great to see the best player in the game right now on this stage playing at the level he's playing at. I think a lot of casual sports fans have come to this series now. And you look at here in the middle of summer on a Monday night with the NBA put to bed, baseball kind of in that boring part of the season, there are a lot of eyeballs on this
Twins
thing.
Live, that's not boring.
Well, we love Twins Live. Yeah. We love you on that. It's terrific. But bottom line is the hockey, we don't normally see the NHL on this type of stage. And to have their best player playing at the level he's playing at, it's just spectacular for the game. And we travel through Canada all the time. I can't believe it's been since 1993 a team from Canada has won the Cup. This would be great, not only for Edmonton and that awesome market, but for everybody up in Canada so people can stop talking about that too.
I talked with Michael a little bit before or after he was up there for Game 6 and the way he described what was happening in downtown Edmonton. is incredible. Now, I haven't been to Edmonton in the summertime. We've only been there in the middle of winter, and it sucks. It's one of my least favorite cities to visit. It's always dirty and kind of grimy and cold. And he said up there right now that it's electric, that the whole town is blue and orange, and that it's just been an unbelievable atmosphere. And so we'll get to questions in a minute. We do have a mic up here, and we'll welcome your questions. We've got some T-shirts to give away. I also talked to one of our newest sponsors, the Fellers Ranch guys. They are going to give away a couple of ribeyes tonight to one of our questions that we get from the audience. We'll have to figure out, maybe we'll let Kevin pick whatever he thinks the best question was at the end of the night.
Nice.
But if you haven't had these Fellers ribeyes yet, it's worth it to come up with a question to stump Kevin, because. And maybe, you know what? You and Chrissy are going to come and join us for dinner on Sunday night. This was prior to tonight's arrangement.
And I'm guessing we're going to have some form of steak.
We probably, I got
She's got a seafood allergy. I want to give you the heads up on that. I didn't mean to do it here on the show, but just want to give you the heads up, because I know you make a ton of great seafood.
Anything else you'd like me to make that night? Well, all right, I'll talk to the Fellers guys. We'll see if we can't make steaks happen that night
great.
as well for Sunday night, for Sunday dinner. That'll be fun. We're looking forward to that.
Me too.
Girls are home, so they're excited to hear some of your stories, and it'll be terrific. Kevin and I go way back. For those that I think we've talked about it on an earlier show, but the first time we ever crossed paths was back in 1988.
Oh, good Lord.
This is the first time that our paths ever crossed. I was doing radio for St. John's University. Kevin Gorg was playing goal for University of St. Thomas. And St. Thomas was a lot better than St. John's back in those days, but
I don't think there was ever a point when St. Thomas wasn't better than St. John's in hockey. Just in general. I mean, I get your football dominance. I'll give you that.
You're right. So anyway. I'm calling the game at whatever it was, like a fairgrounds arena up in St. Cloud.
Yeah, it was awesome. You guys had a lot of fans there.
They used to get good crowds, but they only had fans on one side and one end.
By the opposition's goalie, which is where obviously I was.
You. And I called the game from a little gondola on the other end, like above the net. It was one of the worst broadcasts, other than maybe the Winter Classic. It's the worst spot maybe I've ever called a game. But St. Thomas was way ahead in this game, like let's say 5 or 6 to nothing, and all of a sudden St. John's started coming back, and the fans are all over this goalie. And
they were.
The goalie was nuts anyway. I'm watching him. He's like talking to the posts and everything.
Oh, God.
I had no idea who he was, other than that I knew he had won a state championship at Burnsville. And St. John starts to score, and they get back to within maybe 6-4 or something like that.
That's exactly what happened.
And the crowd is all over the goalie, like, Gorg sucks. And all of a sudden he turns around and flips off the crowd.
I did not flip off the crowd. I gave him the elbow. I didn't stick my fingers in the air like Ryan Hartman.
Well, right.
I gave him this one. I did. I'll admit to it. I was a college kid. I was emotional.
Right,
I did it.
We agree on what happened. I just would call it something different. And so right away, I'm like, I don't know what is with this guy, but this guy's lost his mind. And St. Thomas ended up winning the game like 9-5 or something like that.
It was a crazy game. It was.
And so kind of file that away. And a few years later, I am just getting my start doing local cable television for high school hockey. And Kevin Gorg's the coach now at Burnsville. And we were doing the section finals against Bloomington Jefferson down at Mariucci Arena. And we would always pick the team that we thought was going to win. We would ask to get their coach in the second intermission, because first intermission, the team that we thought was going to lose, they might still be close enough where the coach wouldn't have lost his mind yet. And so my cohort was a guy named Tarmo Kubits. He's the only person named Tarmo Kubits on the planet. He was from Estonia. But he says, all right, I got to run downstairs. I'm going to get the interview. Well, Jefferson was ahead, I think, 5-0. It
was
5-0. First period.
There were 10,000 people there, and we're down 5-0.
And so we were like, hey, guys, we might want to come up with something different for the first intermission. I don't think Kevin's going to likely want to talk to us down 5-0. And all I can hear is through my earpiece, and Tarmo's got a mic, and he says, nope, Kevin's walking down the hallway. I'll have him in about 10 seconds. So Kevin comes down. It's 5-0, and Tarmo says, well, not exactly the period you'd like to have. And, yeah, it's not going exactly well out there, Tarmo. And starts talking, and Tarmo asks, his mind is blown because he can't believe. He says, well, what do you got to do differently in the second period? Well, it's not exactly rocket science here, Tarmo, they're better than us, and I will just let the players try to figure it out. And it's like, what is with this guy?
Well, I got to give you the backstory. So I was a rookie coach that particular year, first year coach in high school hockey. On the other side, and we had a good year. Like, we had a good season. We won 19 games during the regular season. This was a senior-laden hockey team. And so, Jefferson was number one all year long. They were in that middle of that 3-year stretch where they lost like 2 games. And so we were really decidedly an underdog. We played them early in the regular season. They beat us 9-2 in their barn. It was never that close. Come back to Burnsville, middle of the season, and Mike Crowley was this defenseman for these Jefferson teams. He was as good an offensive defenseman outside of Phil Housley that I've ever seen in the state of Minnesota. And we shadowed him, something you didn't see a lot of in high school hockey. We shadowed their defenseman, and it worked. We only lost 4-3, and frankly, we were in the game. Like, it wasn't a blowout. We were legitimately in the game. But being the rookie dummy coach that I was, going against the legendary Tom Satterdahl, I don't make any adjustments going into the section final. And, oh, by the way, we're going from a traditional size rink to Mariucci, which is an Olympic size rink. They're already way faster than our club. And now we're going to shadow this guy again. It was a disaster. So the punchline of the whole 10-1 ass whooping we took is I was teaching grade school Phi Ed at a parochial school out in North St. Paul. And I did playground duty, so I got free school lunch. Who doesn't love school lunch? And I'm out there on that following Monday. I'm still pretty beaten up by the embarrassment of getting beat 10-1 in a section final in front of that crowd. And this 4th grader comes running up, and there's chaos. Kids on the playground, there's fights and all this drama. And this little 4th grader comes up, Mr. G. Wait, okay, Joey, come on up. Do you know what time it is? And this is the era well before cell phones. This is the middle of the 90s. And I say, yeah, I don't have my watch on today. I don't know. And he kind of backs up, and his friends are kind of gathered around like there's something going on. Oh, I thought it was 10-1, Mr. G, and he goes running away. And I'm like, I just got taken deep by a 4th grader. This is the bottom of the barrel, man. Awful. Awful.
That's pretty good, actually.
It was a good line.
So then, a couple of years later, Kevin's coaching at Mounds View. We're over at Roseville Arena to do a game.
Jesus.
And his team's getting blitzed in the first period again, and our sideline guy's waiting over by the Zamboni door. And he says, I don't know where Kevin is. I don't know where he is. And we're coming back from break. We got to. All of a sudden, I look. Kevin's standing behind the bench. He's got his whole team on the bench.
That's true.
The Zamboni's out going around the ice. He made his guys sit on the bench.
I did.
And so then he goes running across the ice. And Tarmo's first question, I don't even remember what the question was. Might have had something to do with why are you guys all sitting on the bench. And he said, well, they embarrassed me in the first period, so I'm going to embarrass them. And they're going to sit on the bench the whole intermission. And so we've had a few of these moments. I remember a time I was getting ready to do a Mounds View game and couldn't get a hold of this guy to get me his statistics, and I finally just show up at his school. You were teaching like detention at Irondale.
I was at Irondale. I was in the ISS, in-school suspension. Those kids needed a lot of
deep
a lot of
supervision.
Help.
So they got it from a guy who was reading the racing form, sitting at his desk in the basement.
It was a big weekend at Santa Anita. I had to be ready.
But I walk in there and I said, hey, Kevin, I've been trying to get a hold of you for like a week. I need your stats. All of a sudden, he gets out a piece of notebook paper and just starts writing. I mean, the odds that this stuff was accurate.
It was close enough.
It is slim.
This is before the high school hockey hub. Now I don't think the coaches even need to worry about it.
No.
It's all digital.
So we cover him a few times, and Kevin gets into the broadcasting business because he's coaching at Mounds View, and a guy named Mike Schwartz is coaching at White Bear Lake. It was a 4-5 matchup in the first round of the section playoffs. And I went to the two of them, and I said, whichever one of you loses this first-round game has to come and be my analyst for the rest of the playoffs. And Tarmo was going to jump down and be our sideline guy. And Mounds View loses the game as the 4 seed to the 5 seed White Bear by a goal, and the rest is history. Kevin comes and he's my analyst for the rest of the week. We did like 8 games, and they went a total of about 10 overtimes.
It was
awesome.
awesome.
Unbelievable stuff. And I was doing a state high school tournament on the radio, and I said, hey, can I bring this guy and have him do radio with me? So he did radio with me there. I got the Gopher pre- and post-game job, and I said, hey, I got a guy who could be the analyst, and all of a sudden he's along for that. It's been since then we've had a few laughs along the way. We've rolled a van on the way back from
we
Badette
did that too.
Together. So we've had a few good moments.
30 years.
And bad moments.
It's been awesome. I mean, it really has. And I know I told my daughters this over the holidays this past year because they always ask how things are going and, the wild season and all your guys you travel with. And I said, it was a couple years ago, and LaPanta and I were walking from our hotel down to morning skate, in downtown Montreal. We're walking to the Bell Center to cover a Wednesday game, right, between the Wild and the Montreal Canadiens. And I looked at him and I said, in your wildest dreams, when we started doing this together in the mid-'90s, did you ever think we'd be here? And, here we are on an NHL game day in this hockey mecca that is Montreal. We both started doing games for basically peanuts, high school games. I remember my parents asking, they were tape delayed at like midnight. And here we are. Like, it was such a cool moment. I told my daughters, I'm like, that's kind of what it's all about. I mean, sometimes in life, and it took a lot of, I know you worked your tail off, and this was kind of always the plan for you. This wasn't always the plan.
It was the goal. I don't know
right.
if Margot wouldn't tell you there was a plan.
But the breaks that you have to get, and you have to work hard and make the most of them. But the bottom line is, we went from doing high school games together on local cable to doing an NHL team, and we've done it now for a couple decades, and it's awesome.
And I remember the moment, because I remember the conversation, thinking that that night. I remember we walked out of the Coliseum after that Hill Murray White Bear Lake section semifinal game. It was one of the greatest games I've ever seen, but we're on tape delayed local cable access television, and now here we are walking down the streets of Montreal to get ready to do a game from essentially the Forum Bell Center. And there are some moments like that just really make you step back. And in fact, we were talking about it today on the golf course with this friend of mine from St. John's who we graduated together, but I've probably only seen him a few times since. And he said, did you ever, I don't even remember in college, you talking about that this is what you're going to do. And I said, well, I knew it was what I wanted to do, but if I told anybody, they'd say, well, how are you going to get there? And I have no idea. I just think maybe I might be good enough to do this. So it was kind of fun. We shared a bunch of those stories. In fact, we talked a little bit about the fact that we had gone back. But I remember one time, at this time you were still married, and I remember your wife saying, he really thinks this is going to be a career for him, and I was making like $50 a week or something. I was engaged, maybe married, had a kid already. I don't know.
It's been a long journey, right?
But
it's been so much fun. And you watch these games and you watch these playoffs, and we're all hoping at some point that we get to go along one of these rides. And I believe it. And this isn't BS. I legitimately believe, with the core of young talent this team has right now, with Bill Guerin at the helm, I actually believe in the next 5 years that we're going to get something like these teams have had, because I always find myself, you get drawn in by certain storylines in these playoffs, and I just want this market to have that. I lived through, so did you, we were in college, the Twins World Series runs. I lived through both those North Stars Stanley Cup runs. They take over the town. The town is electric. It is awesome. We got a little taste of it now with the Timberwolves this year. Wild fans need this, and I do think it's going to happen. I hope it happens sooner rather than later. I'm getting a little older now.
Absolutely. Well, we want to welcome any of you to come up. We've got a microphone here if you've got a question. We've got 5 or 6 T-shirts, it looks like, for questions as well.
Oh, we got a guy right now.
Of course. And but just real quickly on that, as we kind of shift our attention back to the Wild, I've felt, and I've talked about it a few times on this show, that I think when you look at what Billy, and I agree with you, I think they're on the right path. I think Billy's got a plan. I think there's a lot of different forks in the road that we might see this summer that who knows which direction it's going to go. But I've thought from the beginning that as soon as he made the call to the Parise-Suter plan, that it was next year was when you had to wait to evaluate whether or not the plan worked. I'm saying this time next year. That's when. Do you have the right pieces in place? Have you structured your roster properly? Have you been able to extend the right guys? And now can you go get that last piece? And I think right now it looks like they're headed that way. We'll know about this time next year.
I agree. And Ryan Carter, who I just love working with Ryan. He's in the booth with you for a lot of these games. He was on my pod, Wooden Sticks, on the same network here in Talk North, and he made a great point about, and he's talked to you about this, how the Stanley Cup seems to find superstars. When you have a player that's an it player, McDavid is certainly that guy. He's going to win a Stanley Cup. I believe Kirill Kaprizov is that guy for Minnesota. At some point, he's going to get a cup. The job now for Bill Guerin, when you have this guy and you've got a window of 10, 12 years where you've got one of the best 10 players in the league, you have to build around that guy to give the guy a chance to do what McDavid might be doing tonight.
Summer temps are rising, But at Aquarius, it's time for their summer meltdown of savings. Get up to $3,000 off a new high-efficiency cooling and heating system. Plus, with a qualifying purchase, you'll get a free whole home air purification system. Stay cool and comfy with amazing air quality for years to come. It all starts with a free in-home consultation. One of their highly trained comfort specialists will provide options that make sense for you and your home. And that's not all. Enjoy special prices on new heat pumps and mini splits and 50% off an AC tune-up. Don't miss Aquarius's Meltdown of Savings sale now through July. Schedule today at AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius believes in earning the right to be recommended, and don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
Don't wait. Save smarter with a 5.15% annual percentage yield 9-month certificate from Royal Credit Union. Royal's 5.15% 9-month certificate has no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for a guaranteed return on your investment. Open a 5.15% 9-month certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate515. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 4/26/24. Insured by NCUA.
All right, let's have our first question of the night.
Yeah, I actually have two questions. The first one is just talking about a lot of commentary has been around how late this playoff has been going. We're in the middle of almost close to the end of June here, right? And it's going to be a very short turnaround for players to come back into the season who are playing in this final. How does that affect these players when they're coming back into the regular season? And is it going to affect somebody, that they might not have as good a year next year because they haven't had these last couple months for training?
Well, I think I've been among the guys saying I think this is just too late. I think they've got to somehow figure out, and I know that I don't know all the details, but I know it's driven at least partially by ESPN's involvement in the national deal, because in early October they've got baseball playoffs. They don't want a bunch of hockey games going on at that time. I think there's a way around it. The start of the season has been pushed back almost 2 weeks from where it used to be. The Twins used to end on a Sunday, and the Wild would open on Wednesday or Thursday. And now it's 2 weeks later. And if you even push this back 2 weeks, I think it makes a difference if you try to get to the end of June. I've been talking a lot with some friends of mine about it, and I think you've got so many northern markets. Think about people that have just gone through a winter in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or Boston or Chicago or Edmonton or Calgary. Right now it's summertime. They've been cooped up for 6 months. All they want to do is get outside and enjoy the sun. If their team's not in it, it makes it hard to keep them involved and keep following. I had a lot of hockey fans in Minnesota that are just, is it still going on? I'm tired of watching it. So I think there's that. I think the other part is interesting too, though, because if you've got players that get banged up, it's tough to recover that quickly and be ready for the turnaround for next season.
And I think part of what we're seeing in this series, great question, because it feels like Florida has hit a wall at some point in this series, and they played to almost the end of June last year. So it's back-to-back years where they've been dealing with this, and it's a grind. I mean, the regular season is such a grind. So, no, I get it. Great question.
Second question, a little bit more fun. If you had a day with the Stanley Cup, what would you do with it?
You'd be at the golf course. There's no question in my mind.
It for sure would join me at Loggers Trail for at least a while. I mean, there'd be a Sunday dinner where whatever the Italian red of choice was that night would be sipped out of the cup. Maybe visit. I might have to go up to Collegeville and wander through some of the old haunts in Johnnyville.
I'd be at Canterbury. I'd be at the racetrack. I spend all my summers out there. I've done it for the last nearly 25 years.
What would you drink out of the cup?
It'd be a Zima. You know it'd be a Zima. I'm a Zima guy. I'm out there. I know I'm kind of on my own on my little island, but it'd be a Zima, and it'd be no Jolly Rancher. I'll just have you know that.
All right, so you Canterbury. Oh, boy.
You asked.
Canterbury, and that's, yeah, I mean, it'd have to go back to Burnsville at some point, wouldn't it?
It'd go to the Ice Center. It'd go to the Ice Center for sure. We'd stop in Burnsville, have a little fun there, and head out to Canterbury. But, yeah, I just want to see the parade, right? I want to see the Twin Cities embrace. If ever there's a market that deserved a cup, and, I'm going back to my North Star days, 91 was tough, man. This team was ready to pull it off, and I think somewhere along the way in the middle of that series against Pittsburgh, they let Lemieux get healthy, and the rest is history. But, no, we deserve that here, and I think we're going to get it. So,
simple question. Do they trust the rookie and trade Gustafson?
Oof.
Yeah.
Florida's only going to play 30 games at the most.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I haven't talked directly to Billy lately, and my guess is, and Michael Russo and I talked about this a little bit on last week's show, that knowing Billy, he's probably got 3 or 4 different irons in the fire, so to speak, 3 or 4 different paths down which he might go, both with his roster and with the draft. With where they're picking in the draft, I'm sure there's, okay, if these couple guys go, we got to be ready to move, and this is what we realistically think we could get in return to move up or down. But I think the Gustafson question is interesting because I don't think they're in a spot where they're looking at this the same way they looked at Kevin Fiala a couple off seasons ago, where it had to be done. And whatever the best deal was on the table for Kevin Fiala at the end of the summer, they had to take it. There's nothing that says they can't start this season with Gustafson still in the fold. So I think the deal would have to be a good one. If you just go into the season with Fleury and Volstead, one or the other's got to play 50 games. And I'm not sure that right now you could say with confidence either one is a lock to be able to play 50. Fleury's at the age he is. Volstead has only got a handful of NHL games. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I left the season thinking this was a lock to happen. And as time has gone by, I've come to the other side, like you just explained there, because if you make the move, it's got to be a heck of a move because you're putting yourself in a corner now where you're locked in to a guy that's played a handful of games and a guy that's not going to play more than 30 or 35 games, period. It'd be a great scenario for Jesper Volstead to learn from a guy like Fleury. I think that part of it would be awesome. It's a high-risk, high-reward move, though, because I firmly believe a guy like Gustafson has the talent to be better. And I think when you sign that contract, your first big deal, you come off that magical season and you don't get off to a good start, you put yourself in a position, and goaltending is not like any other position. Everybody sees you. When you're struggling and the team's struggling and the coach gets fired, you tend to take it all on your shoulders. And I think he did that, and he never really recovered. He had a subpar year. We all know it. But I think he's got a bounce back in him. So it had to be a heck of a deal for him to make that move.
I think what he had done the year before would have at least a few other teams intrigued. There are a few other teams, and I know we saw some moves involving goaltenders already happen this offseason. But
one big one today. Allmark went to Ottawa.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, while you were driving.
Yeah, that's true. And I never would be looking at my phone while I'm driving.
Not a chance.
Allmark, that's an interesting one because, Boston was in that what are you going to do with 2 goalies spot. But Ottawa was one of the spots that you'd certainly would have thought of, but with Gus coming from there, I didn't think that was a real likely landing spot. I just think there are a few other teams that might be in the position of we've saw something in this guy a couple of years ago for 2-3 months that would lead us to believe there is an upside there, maybe a little bit more of a higher reward, lower risk kind of acquisition. I think there's a landing spot in a market for Gus.
There probably is, and I think if you're Bill Guerin, you get a chance now during the draft next week to maybe throw that out there and see if that conversation happens. But like you said, you can still start the season. Let Volstead go back to Iowa, play all those games in Iowa, continue to build his game. And if you want to make a move in season, you've got that flexibility. So I think Bill Guerin will take a look at all of it. Florida gets the first goal of the game. Team that scores first has won 12 of the 17 Game 7s we've seen in the Stanley Cup.
You had a couple. I'm sure you got some other trends for us.
The trends,
Paul Maurice, I think, is undefeated in Game 7s.
I just, if you backed Florida all the way here to get here, this is the lowest price they've been at home all year long, including the regular season. They were minus 110 tonight on the betting line. They haven't been lower than 130 in any home game all year, so this might have been the night to buy back on Florida.
I thought they absolutely had to score first.
Me too.
In this game, and I agree with you about your statement. I missed 2 of the games. I missed games 4 and 5 in this series, but when I watched Game 6 the other night, they looked absolutely gassed.
They looked
like
so
they had
tired.
Lost all confidence, couldn't make a play. I know the shorthanded goal kind of took the wind out of their sails, but I wonder if it is just some of that fatigue. So a first goal tonight will probably help.
2 questions, please. First, Darby, is this just the final cleansing of the old regime?
I don't know if I'd say a cleansing. I think it was. I think it might have been just the need on the staff. They needed a guy that was a penalty kill guy. Darby's not that. They I think they needed somebody that maybe had a little more of a veteran, like a head coaching type mentality. I got the sense that they were thinking they needed somebody like a la a bench coach in baseball that's just another voice to stand next to the head coach and think a move ahead. And Darby, that's not Darby's strength. That's just my opinion.
And I think if you look at this pragmatically, when you have a coaching change in the middle of the season, John Hines is going to come in, and you're likely not going to have your guy with you at that point, but you're probably going to have a conversation with the general manager and say at some point, can I bring a guy in that I have as my guy, as the assistant? Most head coaches have at least one of those guys, and maybe that conversation happened. We'll revisit it at the end of the year. When you look at Darby Henderson, he's a fantastic coach, but he's even a better human. You don't last through 6 different head coaches in this league in one spot, and I love now that he's going back to Nashville to be with his best buddy, Andrew Brunette. That's phenomenal. I thought he might wait a year, but I get it. It's a great opportunity, and him and Bruno are such good friends. But no, I think John Hines probably had a guy. It's nothing against Darby. Darby had a valuable role in that hockey team, and it's just, to your point, they need to get that penalty kill up and running at a different level, and if they've got a guy that can do that, that's fantastic.
Well, and I'm just speculating. Whenever you make a coaching change, the head coach leans on assistant coaches differently. And I've talked with Darby many times. I haven't talked with him a lot about the recent firing, but I had talked to him about each time the coach changed, just how long that process is before you get used to what the coach needs and when. What does he want to hear? When does he want to have a voice in his ear? And what are the kind of things that he's looking for? And it was different for Darby under Mike Yeo than it was under Bruce Boudreau, than it was under Dean Evison. And with each time it changes, you just never know. And perhaps it was something where John Hines was like, I need a guy that thinks a little differently than this next to me. And it could have been that too. So you never know who that guy is that he might want to bring in. I also just think it might have just been a chemistry and a need on the staff, square peg, round hole kind of thing, because the players love Darby, and that's one of the things that I don't know who the guy will be that replaces that. He was a guy that the players went to, that they leaned on, a little bit of a go-between, a liaison, and I'm not sure who that guy will now be, because Freddie Shabbat's pretty limited with the goaltenders. Pat Dwyer was new last year. Even Kinger he hasn't been around as long. I don't know that any of those guys have the tight relationship with the players that Darby has.
Yeah, Darby played a valuable role, and from the face-offs to that go-between, and you guys, we just talked about it. It's a long grind, and there's ups and downs, and to have a coach that can go back and forth between the players and the coaches and respectfully get both, that conversation going to bring them to the common ground, not to be understated. And I think that it's a real statement to how great Darby can adapt to different coaching staffs and different systems, and how he can fit in with different groups of teams. He's been doing this for a long time and doing it at a high level. So Nashville got a good one.
Second question goes back a few years. So Scott Stevens was with the team for a year and stuff, and I think he did a wonderful job of elevating the defensive core to a high level, and since then we've kind of come down off of it again. What's, one was there more to him leaving after a year than meets the eye, and two, what will it take to get us up to that level again?
Health. If they can keep the defensemen they have healthy, that's a big step in the right direction. I still believe that the strength of this club is their defensive core. And if they're going to make a run, if they're going to be one of the teams to beat in the Western Conference, it's going to be because they can ride a top 4 that's right up there with the best in the game. And when you start talking about Spurgeon, Faber, Brodin, Middleton, you've got a top 4 that can compare favorably with most. And I just think they have to stay healthy. Scott Stevens was great, and I thought he brought an intensity and no-nonsense approach to it. I don't know that there was anything other than that it just wasn't the right fit for him. Because Rick Wilson was terrific with the defenseman before that, and he had a very different way of approaching it. So I think all those guys are good. We'll see. Pat Dwyer kind of had a hands-on role with the defenseman, but I think it depends on what the rest of the staff how it ends up being structured.
Yeah, I think Stevens, if I had it right, I just didn't think he felt he could commit to the job like he needed to. He, as you mentioned, very intense, and I loved watching him work with those guys, but he just didn't feel like he could commit to it as much as needed to be. And, when you play the way he played for that many years, you probably only have so much to give. And so that was more on him than it was him. And the Wild loved having him here, and I think you saw the players, they responded to that guy. He's an unbelievable coach and a Hall of Famer on the ice. So, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way that this club is built and the way the roster is built, I still just think that it all comes down to Minnesota's identity forever has been mobile, puck-moving defensemen that play a structured style. And even this year with all the injuries, when you went back and looked at it at the end of the season in terms of the advanced statistics and the analytics, that if they had just had average goaltending this year, they're a 104-point club. And that's because of the structure with which they play in that defensive core.
I remember you showed me some of the stuff on your laptop. It was the final week of the regular season, and you pointed that out. And, we all kind of had a feeling like, okay, well, this is what we're watching every day. Like, some of these pucks that are going in, they shouldn't be going in. And it was a body of work that lasted 80-plus games. But when you put it that way, it's remarkable. And so when you talk about a team that can get healthy, get that goaltending back up, and maybe, again, you've got Brock Faber now. You know what you have in this guy. I mean, I really think it's going to be a different feeling season this coming year.
If you could look into the future and see what Billy Guerin's wish list is for this year's draft, what's his top 3 wish list items?
Who out of this year's draft? I did you listen to Judd Brackett the other day when he was previewing? And I think it's, you always hear that just don't draft for need in hockey, just draft the best player. And I think last couple of years, it was evident that they went into it a little differently. I think they're still picking the best player, but they needed depth in some certain spots. I think if Billy had his way in his wish list is this year's draft, it sounds like there might be as many as 10, 12, 15 players that are really close to NHL ready. I don't think they need a guy that's NHL ready this year, but I think they want a guy that isn't a 4-year down the road project.
I think they'd love that, and I think they'd love some more size and grit. If you know Bill Guerin, like we do, and we get to talk to him on a regular basis, he's all fine with some smaller skill players. That's great. But I think if you really get to the root of what Bill Guerin's all about, he wants more grit, he wants more size, but he wants guys that can play with grit and play with skill. Big, strong guys that can make plays either end of the rink. I think it's something they'd be looking for from this draft, and I'm with you. If they can get somebody that can come in early and make a roster. I mean, we've seen, between Ogren and Huznadinov, a couple guys that are probably going to be tweeners coming into camp next year. Saw some real, I think, potential there, but he needs guys that can step in and can play cheap right now to get through one more year, and then we can kind of see where that money all goes.
What do you think, based on the short sample size that we saw from those two guys, what do you think is the likely landing point for them career-wise? Well, twofold, this year and then long-term.
Long-term, I think Ogren has way more potential to be a top 6 forward. He looks like a guy that can be a power forward, that can score goals, that can be on a power play, that can make plays. Huznadinov looks more like a checking line guy that's going to play a bottom 6 role. I would say it's a little safer bet that Huznadinov makes the team and makes more of an imprint this coming year, but long-term, I think Ogren has the much bigger upside.
I thought the way Ogren shot the puck was so quickly noticeable that I wouldn't be surprised if Ogren's with this team right out of camp next year. I think he showed that, and it sounds like with an off-season workout program that I'd be surprised if we see a guy in camp that isn't ready.
That'd be great. God, that'd be great.
There are a lot of options to buy glasses out there. If you've been disappointed by high prices or poor online quality, check out our friends at Huxley Optical. I like Huxley for 2 reasons. First is the price. Simply put, I don't want to spend $800 on glasses. At Huxley, I know I'll get the same quality for half the price. They're a small independent business that is here to help you find glasses you love and save you money. Second is the service. They have options catered to what I need, and I know someone will be happy to help me find glasses. Whether it's a lens replacement, office glasses, or a brand new pair, they're always ready to help. Check out HuxleyEyewear.com. Again, that's HuxleyEyewear.com today, or go to their locations in Wayzata or Roseville. Tell them Russo sent you for 10% off your prescription purchase.
So I stopped by Twill in the Edina Galleria, that Scott Dayton shop, the other day. My wife was out shopping, and I didn't have much time. So I was like, I need a pair of jeans. I want another golf shirt. I need a pullover, maybe something else. I went in there. It's a cozy shop. They have a lot of stuff, but it's not a big sprawling space. They have people, very helpful people on site. I go to pick out a pair of jeans, saying, okay, I want some, comfortable but nice looking jeans, something I can wear out to work. And I picked up a pair, and the gentleman who was working behind the desk said, okay, what size are you? What do you want? And I picked up a pair, and he said, okay, you want to try this size and you want to try this brand. He handed me a pair. I walked into to try them out. And guess what? He had picked pants that fit me perfectly, and he knew my size better than I did. He picked out the right size. That's the kind of service you get. So I got everything I needed in about 10 minutes. Perfect shirt, perfect pullover, perfect jeans, all just because they know what they're doing at Twill in the Edina Galleria. Stop by or check them out at twillmn.com.
Hey everyone, Attorney Jerry Bosch here with Bosch Law Firm and WorkCompExperts.com. For almost 30 years, we've represented Minnesotans just like you all over the great state of Minnesota to guarantee they've been treated fairly and with respect when they've suffered a work-related injury. A work injury can change your life in an instant. You need someone on your side who can help you focus on getting back on your feet and getting paid while you do. You may be entitled to medical benefits, wage loss benefits, job placement, retraining, and payment for permanent disability. To make sure you are being paid all the work comp benefits you're entitled to, please call the attorneys at Bosch Law Firm. The call is always free, and there's never a fee unless we recover benefits on your behalf. Call 651-333-8300, Bosch Law Firm, or visit us at WorkCompExperts.com.
Hi, I got two questions. What do you guys think is going to happen on Thursday with the Calder Trophy? And what happened to Adam Beckman?
Oof. Well, Adam Beckman, I'll take that one. I mean, and I love the kid. I do. He's one of the nicest, sweetest young men. He's a guy that has to score goals. He has to produce. He's not going to give you enough grit or enough on the defensive side to be a guy that can score 6, 8, 10, 12 goals in a season. That's just not the guy he can be. And I think the Wild felt that for whatever reason, he wasn't getting to where he needed to go offensively, and so they made the move. It was a move that I wasn't totally surprised by. I'll let you handle the other part.
Well, we talked about Beckman a lot during the season, and he was one of several that when they got opportunities, they didn't take the ball and run with it to where they didn't make themselves irreplaceable. They didn't make themselves impossible to send back down. And I always thought he had a chance to be a better player than he ever showed here, but he never showed it.
Right.
And when you get those chances, they just don't keep coming. And so who knows, maybe a change of scenery will all of a sudden ignite something with him, and we'll see. Really a nice kid, and I think he's got a chance to be an NHL player. I
do too. He's got speed. He can snipe a little bit. It just never seemed to work here.
And the other question was the Calder, and I don't know. I just think that it's
we both know
Connor Bedard's going to win it.
He is.
And what's
I agree, but we both would vote the other way, but we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think what sometimes, and when people will look at it and say, well, you only say Faber because he's a local guy. No, Connor Bedard is going to be a better player in the NHL. I shouldn't say better. He's a different player, but Bedard's going to be a superstar.
Yes.
But that's not how the Calder is handed out. It's not which guy is going to be better. It's who had a better rookie year. And for my money, Brock Faber had a better rookie year. He played meaningful games, meaningful shifts all year long, played more minutes than anybody, and against the other team's best, where Bedard was, he was borderline the worst plus-minus guy in the NHL and playing meaningless shifts all year. He obviously is going to score more. He's a forward. He's a scorer by nature. But Bedard's going to be a superstar in this league, and unfortunately, I think that's why he's probably going to win it.
I agree. I mean, Brock Faber, because of the injuries, was put into a position where this thing could have gone real poorly, and it was just the opposite. I mean, he embraced the opportunity. He played in every single game. He played through injury, and he played against the opposition's best. And up until the Wild got eliminated late in the regular season, to your point, all these games mattered. There was pressure on him to play through injury and to play at a high level. and to take on a role I don't think anybody envisioned him having in his first full season in the league, whereas Connor Bedard had a lot of injuries, played on a team that was never going anywhere, didn't have to play defense, and he'll be a better player as the years go on. But if you're just looking at this year all by itself, I mean, Brock Faber had a better year, period.
I just got a text from Tarmo Kubitz. What are the odds of
come
that?
on.
Honest to God.
You must have teed him up.
No, I didn't. Here, look at it. He just sent me a text. Who do you like in the game tonight?
I love it. I love it.
I mean, it's...
Tarmo's, hey, if you didn't watch back in the 90s, Tarmo Kubitz is a Minnesota high school hockey legend. I mean, he's the best.
He was torso man. We sat... He had the shortest legs ever for like a 6'5" guy. So
Yes.
when we sat at a desk next to each other, he'd be about this much taller than me. It was
strange looking human, but what a fantastic
he
guy.
was just an unbelievable guy. He was actually there when I got hired at KABL back in 1990.
Well, how about Matt Gangle? I mean, there's another connection that we work with still.
Yeah.
In our line of work.
One
This
of
is
the
the guy
best.
that's doing all the World Series games. He's doing the standalone.
He was our director back then.
I mean, it all comes back to that KABL out in White Bear Lake. I used to meet you out there. We did the high school
Prep
magazine
Sports
show.
Weekly.
Oh, it was phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Well, and so when Michael and I were talking about this week and the fact that he might not be able to be here if there was a Game 7, he wouldn't be. And he said, tell Gorg we'll get him like Applebee's gift cards or something if he comes on the show. And it reminded me of the time remember we did a high school game up in.
I know where you're
going. The game was either Warroad or Roseau. No, it was
Grand Rapids.
It was Grand Rapids.
It was.
And we went after dinner because we were going to stay overnight and come home the next day. We're going to go to Applebee's and grab dinner.
Chicken wings.
I mean, you didn't have chicken wings. You ordered salmon and a grasshopper.
But the idea was we were going for chicken wings. I made the pivot to the salmon, and the grasshopper was like my dessert. It was tremendous.
And I thought it was a joke when he
No.
He ordered
It's like a milkshake with a little
salmon and a grasshopper at Applebee's.
It's the yin and the yang, right? Well, Applebee's, they're known for their salmon. It's freshly flown in.
To Grand Rapids, Minnesota, exactly. That's perfect. Well, I hope we'll have something better for you on Sunday night.
Beautiful.
Thank you, guys. I enjoy having you up here. Have the bonus of having Gorg up here. We've never had that before.
That's fun.
So it's always nice to have him here, too. I got a couple questions. My first one is Wild related, but it also has something to do with what we're watching right now. And everyone here has their own opinions on what the Wild need to take that next step. Not necessarily win the cup, but at least competing, Western Conference Finals, something like that. What are your guys' opinions on exactly what needs to come together for this team? Is it coaching? Obviously, we need some better scorers. We need better people to take face-offs. Everyone's aware of that. What, in both of your opinions, is one of the maybe like the top three things that we need to get us on that TV right there?
It starts with goaltending, and I'm biased. I'm an old goalie. But when you move up in the draft and you pick a kid like Jesper Wallstedt, you have a plan. Like this, that started the whole concept of where they're trying to get to. He needs to be that guy. And I think we've seen enough to say he's got the potential. We have no idea what this guy is going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. But if they're going to go where they need to go, he needs to be the guy. Teams aren't going to give away cup-winning goalies. You move up and take him in the first 20 picks of a draft, he has to develop into that guy. And it's gone well so far. He's had the seasoning he needed in Iowa. He's built his game. He had that disastrous first game in Dallas. They got him back up at the end of the year. Yes, they were against San Jose and Chicago, but he looked the part. He needs to continue to build, and if he does, I think that's the most important piece that they're going to need to develop.
I think obviously you have to have goaltending. And I keep going back to that last season, well, the season before last, Gustafsson and Fleury were among the best tandems in the league. They were third in the league in save percentage, and then last year fell off the table the other way. So you have to get goaltending. I think that health is the big thing, and health is more important for this Minnesota club this year than maybe most clubs most years because of the fact they still have one more year with the cap penalties. It's hard to have the depth to withstand the kind of injuries they did this year. So this year they'd have to stay healthy, but Jared Spurgeon has to come back and be Spurgeon. Jonas Brodin has to be able to keep himself in the lineup. Marcus Foligno has to be able to keep himself in the lineup. So if you can stay healthy, get goaltending, I think the coaching thing will be interesting. Anytime you bring a coach in the middle, it's great to get an idea of his style, of his personality, of expectations, those kind of things. But you really can't judge him until they get to go through their camp. They get to plan everything. They get to implement things. They get to install the systems. They get to structure the penalty kill how they want it rather than just making some minor tweaks on the fly. So I think this will be a year where it'll be really interesting to see how John Hines connects with these guys and how them having an entire offseason to prepare under his system comes to fruition. I think that part's interesting, but I think when it comes to the roster itself, you have to stay healthy and you have to get goaltending.
Sounds like good. I agree with that. Okay, my second question. I'm a big fan of the Score North guys, too, and Before We Die, I'm sure you guys know all that with the various sports in this town, and thank God we've seen the Twins win a couple World Series back in the day. Huge Gopher hockey fans, so we've seen a couple of those, but my buddy and I went to White Bear High School.
Go Bears.
And one of our biggest questions is, what's going to happen first? White Bear winning a quarterfinal round?
Yeah.
And actually maybe even making it to the finals, or the Wild getting into the finals?
I actually had a guy stop me. I can't remember if it was this week, and I was out at Loggers Trail. I was hitting some balls on the range, and he came up and he said, "You are among the guys that always points out that White Bear has never won a quarterfinal game." And it took me aback a little bit because I haven't done the high school tournaments in 12 years. And I said, when have I talked about it? I don't know. But anyway, he just said, what always is forgotten is that in 1982, White Bear Mariner made it to the final. And
Dolphins.
And I said, yeah, and
sorry.
Yeah, and I told him that. I said, look, it's White Bear Lake has never won. It's a statistic. It's going to be a story until it isn't. So I think that we'll see the Wild. And as we were talking earlier about what would tell you whether or not Billy's plan worked. It's such a fickle thing to say that you have to win the cup in order for the plan to work. That's obviously the goal. But to me, if after next season, if the Wild aren't looked at as one of the 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that you'd say these are the teams to beat in the West, then if the chips fall in the right way, guys stay healthy, goalie gets hot, whatever, and you end up being the last team standing. But even if you're just one of those legit contenders, then your plan has worked, and you have to wait and see if you make it. So I think we'll see that before we see White Bear win a first-round state tournament game. But in terms of winning the cup, I mean it's a tough thing to predict.
Yeah, we need that. And I think the problem for White Bear is you've got Hill Murray every year waiting for you in those sections, and Bill Lechner's such a great coach. That's such a good program. It's just so hard to get there. And sometimes maybe you work so hard to get there and you have that big high that you get to the tournament and all of a sudden there's that letdown. It's been close, and we saw it last year. They've had chances, so you hope that they get it done. Yeah, with the Wild, you mentioned it with Edmonton, and you need breaks along the way. You need luck along the way. It isn't just about building a team and then they just go get the job done. You mentioned it. Brock Besser gets hurt. Demko's out for Vancouver. Edmonton's down 3-2 in that series, and they were on the ropes. If you watch that series, Vancouver had them over a barrel. And then in the Dallas series, they're down 2-1 in the series. They're down 2-0 right away in Game 4. And if they lose that, they're probably toast. So there's been a lot of things along the way where they've been able to weather the storm. And even in this series, I mean, down 3-0, and the odds of them coming back, I mean, astronomical odds they've overcome. And they've done it all year. I'm like, this is a team that was one of the betting favorites to win the Cup before the year started, got off to that horrendous start, got their coach fired, and they've kind of rallied around each other because of some of the adversity they faced.
Isn't it amazing when you look at the number of coaching changes that have been made in the last year, and to think that this is one of them? Remember, we were in Edmonton shortly after the change, and they were in just as much disarray as Minnesota was at that point.
Yeah, they looked lost. They just look like a team, and it's so funny because – you watch these Stanley Cup playoffs and you watch this series specifically, I can't tell you a year where I haven't felt like when the Wild played Edmonton, they weren't going to win. Like, the Wild have owned these guys, even with McDavid there. Like, they've owned these guys for years. And it's funny how matchups work in this league, how teams change and get better, and how goaltenders like Skinner find something. But I don't look at Edmonton as a team that the Wild would have some, oh my God, how can they beat these guys tonight? You know the numbers. I know you have something in one of your charts, and so it's just remarkable. They're a team in the Western Conference we're going to have to deal with for years to come. But if you look at the way the Wild have played against McDavid and the Oilers, I don't look at them as a team that's going to be a team that's impossible for the Wild to get by.
When you start to look around and you look ahead at some of the teams in the West, and Edmonton they're going to be a factor every year just because of their star power. But you start to look at the way some of the other teams, the steps Vancouver took this year. Dallas, to me, looks like a team that's going to be they're going to be a handful for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Nashville turned a corner this year and made a good run toward the end. You're looking at some teams with Winnipeg really took a big step this year. Colorado's going to be tough. It isn't going to be an easy path, no matter how Minnesota's roster is structured.
No, it's not. And I think that, you look at Dallas and Colorado specifically, those are teams that we're quite familiar with. Dallas has some good young talent. They've got some guys at the end, Pavelski, obviously moving on. And you look at even where Jamie Benn is. They got the young goalie. They've got young defensemen. They've got now young forwards that are making big strides. So, yeah, I look at Dallas and Colorado as two big hurdles. Edmonton, as you mentioned, is going to be there. Vegas, you didn't bring them up. They're built to be a winner year in and year out. So, yeah, it's not going to be easy. But, you look at where this team can be, and you look at what the potential is when this team is healthy. And if you're right, and those analytics tell you that you are, you put up 100 points, and they did the prior 2 years, you're in that conversation already, and that's before you get to a position where Bill Guerin can use some of that extra cash. And I think they need to find somebody in the top 6, whether it's a guy you're developing or a guy you're going to bring in to take the pressure off Kaprizov on a nightly basis. And maybe Matt Boldy can continue to get better. He's 22 years old, I think. He's got some upside. He's a remarkable scorer, but you need another guy up there that can continue to help elevate and take pressure off the 97.
All right, we'll make one last call for questions. And remember, and as I throw this out, I know that you can think and speak at the same time. So
sure.
In the back of your mind, you got to be thinking about whose question was the best, because we're going to give them a couple of feller stakes. But then while you ponder that, I'll put you on the spot this way. You're obviously Kevin's role with us as our sideline reporter with the Wild. So each intermission, each night, you've got a player on the bench for an interview. Who's the one guy that when you hear the name, like, this is who we're going for, who's the guy that you think, okay, this is going to be a breeze because he's a good talker, and who's the guy that, all right, this is going to take a little work for me?
The first question's easy. It's Marcus Foligno. Whether the team is winning or the team is losing, you're going to get a great interview from Marcus Foligno. He makes the job so damn easy because of his personality, his charisma, and the way he's unafraid to speak his mind. Some guys get that camera in their face and the red light, and they're like, he's not that guy. Like, he will give you something good, whether the team's playing well or whether the team's struggling. I'm going to give you a guy that moved on to Toronto, and he's the nicest, sweetest kid, but Connor Dewar was like a deer in the headlights. That poor kid, and I know Russo, when he listens back to this, is going to have a smile on his face, because every single time Connor Dewar scored a goal ever in a Wild uniform, Russo would text me and our producer, John Stroh, and say, you have to interview Connor Dewar. And Connor Dewar's the guy, we normally do 2 questions in those intermission interviews and get the boys back in the room. You had to have 3 or 4 questions ready because he was so afraid to say more than 2 or 3 words, and then it was over. And away from the camera, he was damn funny, and he'd have some good, pranks at our expense. But on the, when the red light came on, that poor kid froze.
His dad used, every time I saw him, all he wanted to do was get an invite for dinner. So
he was aggressive. Yeah, he was super aggressive.
Guy. All right, here's our last question.
You talked about the intermission interviews, and I've always wondered, there's a guy that used to hold the door. I didn't see him much this year.
Yes.
But he would always rub his earlobe or pull on it. I just wondered if you could
There's a story
talk about
there.
that a little bit.
There's a story. So his name was Wes. He has moved on to Dallas. He's very close with Ryan Suter and his family, and so he's kind of become a guy that helps when Ryan's traveling, helps out with all the kids, because he's got kids that play all kinds of sports, and, when you're a pro hockey player, you're moving and you're not in town. And so he helps out the Suter family immensely, lives down there, takes help, around the neighborhood, and lives in an apartment not far from the rink. Wes had a mother that passed away years ago that loved the Minnesota Wild. And she knew that her son was near where the interviews took place. So she would always say, when you're doing the interview, can you signal me that you know that I'm watching and thinking about you? And so that was what he would do. So he's kept that tradition going, or he did keep that tradition going years after his mother passed away to tell her up in heaven that he was still thinking of her while he was working the game. Fun question.
All right. Well, it's a good way to end the show.
Yeah, for
great
sure.
Question and great insight from you. Always great having you with us. Looking forward to Sunday dinners. Make sure you send me those dietary restrictions.
I will.
So we
I
can
will.
get those done. Now, so which of the questions? We got a couple fellers ribeyes, and you got to come up with whose question you like the best.
So there were no bad ones. So I can't throw anybody under the bus. They were all
You don't
good.
have to say whose is the worst. You
No.
just have to pick one that.
But listen, it's an easy answer for me because of my background. One of the biggest question marks going into the season is what happens with those Wild goalies. And I'm a goalie guy, so the gentleman that asked me about the goalie situation needs to get the stakes.
All right. So which guy was that? I don't remember. Who asked the question about the goaltending?
There he is. There's our guy.
All right. So I'll get a contact info from you in a minute, and we'll get you in contact with the fellers, guys. And thank all of you for coming out tonight. We appreciate you making your way indoors on a great summer night. Always appreciate the support and the crew here at Tuttle's, as always, providing with good food and beers and cocktails throughout the show. Thanks to our sponsors, Aquarius Home Services. Of course, tonight's show came from the Aquarius Home Services studio here at Tuttle's, Royal Credit Union, Huxley Optical, Bosch Law Firm, Fellers Ranch, and Twill at the Galleria in Edina. Kevin, thanks very much for joining us. Look forward to dinner on Sunday night. And
it's going to be awesome. Great to be here, and thanks again for coming out on a summer night and supporting the show. And we can't wait to get Michael back. Can't wait to hear about all his travel drama, and it'll be wonderful. Poor guy, he needs 6 coffees a day.
I don't know if you heard, but Marriott and Starbucks now teamed up somehow, so I'm sure he's got 8.
He's doing just
8
fine.
billion points there too. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive.